Hello, everyone, and welcome to the GMologist Presents. A pretty cool show. I got a call back from Rich, who, yes, I identified correctly as Rich from Cockatrice Nuggets, and I respond to him. And then I have a cool discussion with my buddy Greyic, who is a player in my AD&D Against the Slave Lords campaign. We talk about Greybox Forgotten Realms, why it's kind of cool and still relevant, and why maybe you should decide if you want to run a Realms campaign. Start there. Skip all the world-ending events, world-shattering events, and start when it first started. I think it's a really good setting, and honestly, I'm planning to run a campaign there using Osric. So that's coming up. Some people have made characters, and it looks kind of cool. Vanilla D&D, AD&D, Osric setting. Anyway, here's a call from Rich.
Hey, this is Rich. You were correct. Cockatrice Nuggets. Something I might like to spin up again, but when I have better time. So Stars Without Number and Worlds Without Number, I wasn't even talking about the Atlas or any of the expansions. In the core books, both of them have really good settings. Stars Without Number is pretty good, but I really, really like Worlds Without Number. It's the crazy kind of sci fantasy, 7 different, generations of invaders come, aliens have come, and it's actually locked off from anything else. It's an iteration. His mind works very, very interestingly, and the places he's gone with that, I mean, I scrapped my science fantasy setting to play in his science fantasy setting because it was just so much better. But yeah, check it out. I think there's like 40 or 50 pages in each book of setting, so definitely sit down and reread those because they're amazing. Talk to you later.
Hey, Rich, thanks for the call. And yeah, I think I need to reread those. I stand corrected. I need to check out those 40 or so pages or 20 or so pages in each book. And maybe if I can get a hold of you, have you come on and talk about Kevin Crawford's Worlds and Worlds Without Number and Stars Without Number. That would probably be the best thing. I really am intrigued by it. And I mean, hey, I did like the Atlas, and to think that it has other considerations there. There's like this, not generational, but eons, maybe millennia of other history is pretty cool. So thanks again for the call, Rich. And now, on to the discussion with Greyic. Hello, everyone. This is a segment that I just kind of came up when we were talking at the end of one of our gaming sessions. I have with me Greyic, who you might know from the online play that we do, the Against the Slave Lords campaign, and he plays Riordan. And if you looked at our special Dwellers of the Forbidden City, he played the pre-gen Dread Delgath. How are you doing today, Greyic?
I'm doing great. Thanks for giving me a chance to chat with you more today, Carl.
Yeah, we were just talking, like I said, about Forgotten Realms, wanting to run Vanilla Realms using Osric 3rd Edition, take advantage of the new Matt Finch product. And we just started talking Greybox Realms. And you had some cool ideas to run a campaign for your group.
Yeah, so I was telling Carl right before we got started here that I've been wanting to run an Advanced Dungeons and Dragons campaign for my group of friends in my locality for a really long time now. And just to give a bit of background, I think this is covered actually during character creation back when we started our current AD&D Greyhawk campaign. I'm a bit of a latecomer to AD&D, actually. My experience of it primarily came from the computer games. When I first ran the game, I actually admittedly ran it 1st or 5th edition, and I DN for my friends, but I really wanted to get back to Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, because to me, I really want that classic adventure gaming type of substance. And Forgotten Realms is something that I had experience in through Baldur's Gate 2, Neverwinter Nights. I mean, because at the time, TSR and the Wizards of the Coast were setting all their products in Forgotten Realms. It
Yep.
basically became the default setting for second edition and for then sort of third, and I feel it's still sort of kind of default for our fifth edition. Obviously, made really popular, or maybe even more popular these days with Baldur's Gate 3 for anybody who's enjoyed the computer game of that. But I went ahead and bought a copy of the old first edition Greybox and was really kind of enchanted by it. And it helped that a year ago, even more than that now, I had actually played through the classic. I think it was 1988. It came out, Pool of Radiance by SSI, and it took place in Forgotten Realms. I think it was like the first big Forgotten Realms computer game there, and it faithfully recreated the first edition rules for the most part. And it took place on the Moon Sea in the ruined city of Flan. And you had to fight back a massive invading army of orcs and Banite priests. And you had to fight Tyrant Thraxus, the evil spirit, the possessing spirit, who occupied the body of it was a this is either a copper dragon or bronze dragon at the end of the game. I'd have to double
Mhm.
check that to be honest. But it was really interesting because you'd go from first level fighting, goblins and orcs and like all the way up to taking down his hordes of fire giants, and it was just pure AD&D goodness. And a thought of mine was, I'd love to run a campaign right there and getting a lot of that in because first edition Forgotten Realms, especially if you decide to go with a classic D&D setting where the characters are not as super heroic, where logistics matter a lot more. If you decide to emphasize those rules, it has a lot of politics and warfare built in that gives a certain vibrancy to the world that I think is really interesting because, um, and I want to be careful with this because I don't want to yuck anybody's yum here, but Forgotten Realms modernly, I think, is seen as a very high power setting and is a real kitchen sink setting where everything is thrown in. And I think it's probably because over time, as different source books came out for D&D, especially well, I don't want to blame second edition. Second edition is wonderful for this reason. We love all the different settings for second edition, but certainly I think there became a bit of a need to have Forgotten Realms become a gigantic, big tent to house all the content in. If you go back to first edition, it definitely has a feel. It's higher magic than Greyhawk. You have characters like Kelvin Blackstaff, who he's like a 27th level magic user in Forgotten Realms. But why is he not just out saving the world? Well, you have to remember that in the older editions of D&D, with the spell memorization slots and the generally lower power level characters, even if you got to high levels, you didn't have that many hit points. And the fact that you had these very powerful organizations that would stand opposition, like, of course, big classic bad guy organization being the Zentarum.
Right.
And you're explicitly told that Manchun, who's still in charge back then and is still kicking, he's got an entire fortress full of magic items. And
Mhm.
definitely anybody who play classic D&D, no attunement back then. You have as many magic items as your DM allows, more or
Right.
less. And if this guy's pulling out, artifacts that give him crazy stuff there, he could really rock your world. But that made for a great bad guy organization. But even Manchun can't be everywhere at once. So he's got a proxy war going against the other dictator from across the way in Hillsfar. I'll have to look up his name again. But they're warring over a city. I think this is just ripe for adventure. And now I got to look that up here.
I know it's Self-Rail, the High Blade of Mole Master. That's another one that they're fighting. I'm just looking at, but I feel like the first Forgotten Realms, the first edition, right? There were some novels like that took place in the Moonshades, like Darkwell and the like, and some of the Streams of Silver and Crystal Shard, the early Drift stuff that were contemporary there with the first edition. But I felt like the early Forgotten Realms was really a kind of points of light. You really have these city states, with like Waterdeep and then you have a few nations, but a lot of these like little city states dot the map, and everything else around is wilderness and dangerous. And then you have like the Dale lands, which are just like a village and some farms, and perfect place to have your character start from the village and zero to hero in the region. So it does have this sort of classic, again, points of light type of feel. It's not as crowded, and I think that's what happened, over time, you know, that Forgotten Realms became more and more populated, and the points of light, kind of spread, right? I think that's
I,
maybe what kind of happened.
I think you're right about that to an extent, because particularly if you look at like the Sword Coast region, which obviously got the most amount of development,
Mm-hmm.
and for good reason, because I mean, other than the Dale lands, I think Sword Coast was, and you can correct me if I'm wrong in saying this, I think that was sort of Ed Greenwood's sort of personal playground because he really loved the city of Waterdeep.
Yeah.
For instance, we can take a look at the first edition map of realms, and so one thing that really stands out to I think anybody who looks at it is you can look at Baldur's Gate, and then you can look up towards Waterdeep, and you'll see that there's no good road connection there. If you want to go there, you either need to get a boat, or you're going to have to brave a really dangerous trail. It takes you by Dragonspear Castle, which you learn had a gateway to the lower plains in it. That is a really dangerous area, but it
Yeah.
could also make for a great campaign setting where you could be part of the Flaming Fist, or maybe working alongside them, and you learn that, hey, demons are pouring out of Dragonspear Castle again. We need to go deal with this before this entire area turns into a completely dangerous wasteland. Or you could have massive orc invasions coming down from the High Moor because they're running around there too. But I think you're right, Carl, that the older version of the realms, I mean, the new, the current version of the realms, I don't want to say it's not true. It's still, in many areas, is dominated by city states, but, you have Cormyr, you do have Sembia, you do have Am, you do have some, nation states there as well.
Mm-hmm.
But you have these vast stretches of wilderness there, and if you're using the original edition rules, that is, if you're using AD&D rules, and you're being relatively strict about encumbrance limits and movement rates and things like that, then suddenly crossing this great expanse that the realms covers, because the realms is absolutely massive. Let's bear in mind that this thing is continent size. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's a great graphic comparing the size of Faerun to the United States, and Faerun is significantly larger than it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's these huge stretches of wilderness, and you're right, where you've got these a couple powerful city states here and there, but they're surrounded by danger.
Yeah.
But that's also your classic D&D setting. I mean, this can arguably trace it back to think on like Keep on the Borderlands,
Mm-hmm.
where you have your home base, and then you have, the untamed wilderness full of chaos and evil cultists and orcs and goblins and other nasties out there who, more likely than not, they're ready to cave your head in with a battle axe.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's what attracted me back to just writing against the slave lords, because I always felt Greyhawk was not I mean, it does have big nations, but it seems still very sparsely populated. And there are
Oh,
even within a nation, there are points in between, right? So, and
it
then,
absolutely is. I mean, Greyhawk is kind of renowned for being extremely sparsely populated, but it was really interesting that when I started diving into first edition realms
mhm,
and comparing it to Greyhawk, both of them were, they're not high population zones, but at the same time, the nation states that do exist or the polities that do exist, there's a lot of tension between them.
yeah,
And I feel that, and again, maybe it's just me, I feel that these days, um, with kind of more focus on godly interactions, particularly in Forgotten Realms, because there's fourth edition had the whole spell plague thing, as I recall. And if you look at, say, any of the gameplay from Baldur's Gate 3, the meddling of the gods is extremely, extremely present. And you have a lot of much higher levels of power and fantasy going on. And again, that's fine. That's the kind of game you want to run. But something that was very interesting to me was that in the older realms, even though you had this vast expanse of wilderness, the city states that do exist are almost what comes to mind actually as I'm sitting here kind of thinking out loud is the Greek city states around like the time of the Peloponnesian War. They all
mhm,
hate each other. They're all looking to ally against each other and fight each other.
mhm,
And again, to kind of go back to my idea of a Moonsea campaign, that was a great, a great example of it because if you read about the recent events of the realms in the Grey Box around 1357, the classic setting, Sentinel Keep has just had a big war with Melvont and Mulmaster. They had a big naval confrontation. Mulmaster and Melvont lost, as I recall. Mulmaster is basically in a civil war because their losing leader there wasn't too popular after losing a big war, and so he got, he got murdered.
mhm,
Again, Hillsfar has been taken over by a dictator called Malthier. I found his name there,
cool.
and he's kind of having a proxy war with Zental Keep and Ulash. But at the same time, this is a great opportunity. Like, who else is going to get involved in this? The Iron Throne, the mercantile organization who would be the bad guys in the Baldur's Gate series, actually, they just formed in Sembia. I'm sure that they're going to look for ways to start selling tons of weapons up in this area. And then at the same time, you've got the big forest there in near Shadowdale and then Myth Dranor, which has got some magic artifacts if you want to brave the
Right.
demons that tore the place down. So it's just a great campaign setting where you can get involved in the politics, or you can just focus on some
Yeah, you
classic
could just
adventuring.
explore a mega dungeon setting that could be Mithranor. Yeah, I remember they actually had a supplement for Pools of Radiance, like is a second edition supplement, I believe, or was it first edition? I think it was first edition supplement for Pool of Radiance.
Yeah, they
I
do.
believe.
They had a campaign module that was
Yeah,
based off of it called Ruins of
Ruins
Adventure.
Adventure. Yeah,
And
I used to have it. I'm sure I lost
yeah,
it
and
along the way.
actually, Ruins of Adventure, I didn't want to use a whole scale when I was considering my own campaign here because I couldn't completely wrap my head around. I'm going to admit this. It's great for the video game, but I couldn't completely wrap my head around like, okay, the city's half occupied, but why haven't they just overrun the remaining half of it as of yet?
Right, right.
So there's some things that I was kind of struggling with reconciling there. But like all the old TSR products, I think that they're great for mining for inspiration, if nothing else. And I know that, for instance, one of the considerations that I had to just keep on bringing in more factions and adding some more interaction was, and this is in both the Pool Radiance video game and in the Ruins of Adventure, there's a plot line about how the Stojano River that goes through the city of Flan is being poisoned. And
Hmm.
it turns out that there's an island called Sorcerer's Island with a big pyramid on it, and there's a wizard there who um, is trying to create these kind of mutant crossbreed lizard man, but
Hmm.
he's also dumping pollutants into the water, which is making it poisonous and is eventually probably going to destroy the city because if it renders the water supply toxic, then that's really bad. But it occurred to me that you want a great way to put a spin on this and add to your campaign. Make your evil wizard there. Somebody who's in league with like Tyrant Draxus, for instance, if you're going to use him as a villain. And then if you want to really spice it up, make him a red wizard of Thay.
Oh yeah, that
And
could be very interesting. Hmm.
and have him with his crossbreeds there also making if you want to take kind of steal a page from the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movies, have him making kind of his version of Urukai, make him make Neo Orogs. You can
Right.
go find the stat block for them from second edition.
Yeah, I think that'd be a pretty fun set of adventures. I've always liked that feel from way back. So I think that's why I made that. I kind of threw that out there among some of my group is like, hey, I want to run Dale Lands type adventure, and they were like, well, I don't, all the stuff that happened, they also feel like it became crowded or there's so much like lore. So let's go back to the beginning before all this lore happened, right? I think that's part of it. But I think,
Well,
what's interesting is like, and partly I was actually inspired by the latest offerings from 2024, which are the Heroes of Faerun and Adventures in Faerun. And the Adventures in Faerun is really cool because they're just like one page adventures, like dozens of one page adventures that you could just take out and plop almost anywhere. They give you some suggestions, and then in it seems like it's almost like a reset that the authors decided to do a reset back to like the sort of city state adventure, the hex crawl, or the mega dungeon explore, and everything is back to more isolated towns like in the Dalelands or city states in Moonsea or Sword Coast region.
Well, something
So,
I particularly liked about the Forgotten Realms, I just thought was just enormous fodder for the imagination, was in the 1E gray box set. If you went to the Dungeon Master source book for the realms, and we were just talking about this immediately before the we started here. If you go to the recent news and rumors of the realms, and it just gives you all sort of the current events for 1356, and then 1357, as I recall, it gives you
yep.
the past years of events.
Mm-hmm.
There is so much content there that you can build off of, and it's into my mind, it just oozed charm. I mean,
Yeah.
this is, it's I'm struggling for words at the moment here, because I'm thinking out loud. But I mean, here, let me find something to. I mean, some of the stuff is, could be great for just like a little adventure, like Hammer January of 1357. A dragon is believed to be nesting in the mountains near Archendale. Whole herds of cattle have vanished from secure fields at night, and many small fires have been seen in the remote forests of the mountain slopes. Okay, so that's an easy dragon adventure.
Yeah.
But and here's but I mean, for instance, this is one that plays off what I was talking about with the dangerous roads ahead of Baldur's Gate.
Mm-hmm.
Going into March, chess. All is quiet around Dragonspear Castle. The armies encamped there report no devils or other foes have been seen since the Feast of the Moon, but at least one caravan from Calimshan heading northwards from the borders of Am at the beginning of Chess has vanished without trace in the
Mm.
lands between Am and the Way Inn, where Waterdeep's forces have a guard on the road. Knights of the Waterdeep Watch are readying griffins for aerial patrols on the caravan ways as soon as spring comes. Young griffins and intact Warren Griffin eggs are sought, and Perigion will pay top prices for any brought to him in Waterdeep. So,
Yeah, another they're like adventure hooks.
Right,
right?
they're great adventure hooks, and you're explicitly told to use them as adventure hooks. So
Yeah,
that
yeah.
one you're off trying to go get griffin eggs, and
Hmm.
then if I go a couple paragraphs further, orcs are reported to be on the move in large bands near Baldur's Gate.
Hmm.
Some believe that there are forces from Dragonspear Castle sneaking away ere Waterdeep's forces attack again in the spring. And then, in April, they find the Tome of the Unicorn, a lost grimoire of the Shun, super powerful magocracy from back in the day.
Yep.
They there's a lot of opportunities there for that kind of adventuring there's a lot of those great hooks there. And I think that you can really use the personalities here in a way that, again, especially if you're trying to run this in an old school manner where they don't feel completely world destroying if you use them in your campaign respectfully.
That's true. Like it's not world destroying. It's kind of like local, like even like this one from which I thought was kind of cool. If you wanted to set up a conflict in the Dale Lamp with the Zentarum in the year of the Worm, 1356, Shadowdale has repulsed an attack from Zental Keep. The tiny army of adventurers, villagers, and elves inflicted very heavy losses on an attacking army that outnumbered them by more than 4 to 1. It is rumored that an insect plague raged over the battlefield, and it is known that the woods near the dale were set afire. No formal declaration of war or comment on the battle has been made by either side in the conflict, and Shadowdale's new lord, Doust Sulwood, who came from the west, Cormyr, Waterdeep, maybe even the Moonshade Islands last year, with the pendant of Ashaba to claim the very high seat, is yet a mystery. Most of the Dales and clergy have dispatched envoys to him. So you could have this sort of intrigue and sort of Cold War conflict between Shadowdale and Zental Keep. Maybe it's a proxy war between Elminster and Manchun or something.
Right. Well, that's the thing. The whole region is ready to explode. I mean,
Yeah.
just a couple paragraphs later, I mean, we talked about how I think it was in 1356, they had the big naval battle. Well, a couple paragraphs after the one you just read, Carl,
Hmm.
it says the city of Melvant is a scene of unprecedented shipbuilding activity. Over
Hmm.
60 vessels of all sizes are being constructed along the shoreline, having spilled both east and west out of the workshops for lack of space. It is not known who is paying for the vessels or for what purposes they are intended, but observers say at least four of the large vessels have ram spire hulls. So plainly, they're gearing up for war again.
Yeah.
The region's ready to blow up once more, and you could put the players there, and if they say, look, we don't want to get involved in local politics, we just want to adventure, okay, that's fine, because you've got great adventure sites there. But at the same time, you can pull them in this, and you'll have no shortage of good guy and bad guy factions for them to
Right.
play with.
Yeah.
Or
It
or
could
maybe
be they're exploring at the edge of the woods or the edge of the Moon Sea, and all of a sudden a patrol from one of these polities comes. They come across as a random encounter, right? And it can lead to a whole lot of interesting things, right? Or they have to go to one of these cities for some reason, and it gets under siege, or you could really they don't have to be involved like at the politic level, but it could be a backdrop for an adventure. It could be scenery, that they have to interact with and deal with during the course of the gameplay of the campaign.
and it
So,
really has to be emphasized once more that the first edition realms kind of, when I read through the events of this, and candidly, I'd have to read the whole thing through again in order to capture all of them. I don't have it
mm,
memorized, but there was essentially adventure hooks and things happening in basically anywhere that had some significant civilization.
yeah.
There's no shortage of, and it wasn't just, and I should even make it clear, it wasn't just even adventure hooks, it was factions on the move and things
Mm,
happening. And we don't have a world back then that is quite as set in stone in some ways. I mean, one thing that immediately comes to mind is, of course, our favorite bad guy magocracy, Thay. Back then, Zastam is a Zulkir necromancy, but he hasn't, taken over the entire country yet and turned into a land of the living dead. I mean, he's still struggling to see who's going to win, the power struggle for dominance among the other Zulkirs. And I like to imagine that that's going to send a lot of red wizards out to adventure on their own to gain power so they can come back home and they can make their stake for total control here. But
Yeah.
I kind of like that a bit better than respectfully Modern Realms, where Zastam is kind of this uber duper lich and sort of the god king of Thay.
Yeah, I think that's what happens. It becomes because there's no. This is. I don't even know. I wonder if this was the original intention too, right? Um, and perhaps this was the original intention in Greyhawk before they did like Greyhawk Wars and I Use the Evil and all this kind of stuff. Is that uh, this was the setting. It was static, and you start in 1357 or whatever here in the realms, and it becomes your realms. So things happen that are specific to your table's realms, and I'm obviously that can happen, you know, at any stage. It can become your realms. You can say this never happened, but I guess you always run into this maybe it's mythical, but like
Well,
the realms expert, but that's not the way it's supposed to go, and this is what happened. And I watched the movie, and that's what happened in Neverwinter, and that
well, and I think you make a really, really great point there, Carl, that I think one of the reasons why, especially for people who like classic D&D, who go back to the early 80s, or even to the 70s, Greyhawk has a kind of enduring appeal because Gary Gygax made his world and added just enough to it, and then basically said, make it your own. And we got all these great modules for it, but if you look at TSR's old modules, they weren't exactly heavy-handed with a lot of lore and the like. I mean, the DM was really expected to flesh these things out.
Yeah.
I mean,
Case in point, A1 through A4, if you just take them as the tournament modules they were, there's no framework other than, hey, these are the slavers, this is their dungeon, take it out. It really didn't put, and that makes it's up to the GM then to put it into the context of a campaign world, and how does it work, and how do the players get there, what do they do with all these people that they free, how does the logistics work. And maybe that's not fun for everybody, but I think in a real campaign that you're trying to bring to life as a GM and as players, then those things got to be fleshed out, and then it's up to you as a GM and with the cooperation and help of the players to do that.
Well, yeah, and I definitely want to give some of my own musings on that, because that's another huge topic for discussion. But before I move there, just to the point of making it your own world, I feel that original Greybox Realms really invited you to do that. I can't help but feel that by the time we get to more like the 5th edition Forgotten Realms, there is so much kind of baked into the setting now, and so many expectations. And mind you, I might just be completely wrong here and just talking nonsense, but I do feel that is harder to want to approach it when you don't feel, at least for me as a DM, it's hard for me to want to approach it when I feel like tweaking the setting or changing the pieces is going to break something, so I feel that first edition Realms, it gave you all these hooks because it really wanted you to make it your own. And admittedly, the elephant in the room there, of course, though, is edition changes, because
Right.
let's bear in mind, with second edition came the Time of Troubles.
Right.
With fourth edition came the Spell Plague, and I must admit that I would wanted to get into D&D at that time. As I noted, I didn't finally actually get to the table until 5th edition, despite the fact how much I had played the computer games. So I was following things, and I must admit, I was one of those who's like, they got rid of Helm as a DD? What the heck is going on here?
Yeah.
But there is the danger that the publishers felt the need to update the settings to follow the product line so that they could induce sales. I think there is a real component to that. But there's some debate over what's lost in the process. Again, to kind of draw it back, the nice thing about going old school here is you have an almost a blank slate.
Mm-hmm.
You can really make it your own. Although you have these powerful personalities there, again, especially if you're trying to use an older school rule set, their abilities to, bring world altering power is much more limited. Some of these characters, like I said, Calvin Blackstaff, 27th level magic user, so he's going to have 9th level spells and the like. But when you start remembering that, he's probably locked in opposition with other really, really powerful beings there. He's not going to be going out and, changing the world up and down the Sword Coast just willy-nilly there, especially again that there are huge restrictions on what you could do with that kind of power in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. So but I think that also created a real opportunity for us to go adventure. Again, it's the difference. It's a difference in power level, and you need to fit this to fit wherever your table is. Obviously,
Right.
for any DMs who are listening to this, obviously, you want to run a fun game, and you want to run a game that's going to be fun for you to run. So if you want to run a crazy high level game or a really really high magic game, go nuts. That is your prerogative. Again, I don't want to yuck anybody's yum, but at least for my personal tastes, I do tend towards a little bit of a lower fantasy, and I kind of do like that, more natural progression where it's like, we're kind of scrapping by here trying to defeat this horde of orcs at level 1, and our concerns are very, very mundane. Again, I'm not trying to throw shade at Baldur's Gate 3, but compare with the beginning of Baldur's Gate 3, where your first level character is implanted with a mind flayer tadpole, and you're on board a nautiloid that passes through the 9 hells and back before you crash land outside of Baldur's Gate.
Yes. Okay.
First level. And I mean, it's a cool opener for sure, but it's a dramatically higher level of fantasy. And, when they were doing first edition realms, Spelljammer hadn't come out yet. I don't think that they're thinking about nautiloids. Mind you,
Yeah.
they did have crashed spaceships, to be fair.
Yeah,
we had Expedition to Barrier Peaks already, but you weren't tackling that at first level more likely than not.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah, well, so I guess obviously you don't have to play in a pre-published setting. You can play in your own world. I'm sure there's going to be people like will say, well, you could just do homebrew, but I think it kind of makes it fun and easy, and it's like fiction. It's a good read, and it can be kind of fun to put it in a world that if the outline or a template has been set down for you. So,
well, that's the thing. And the nice thing about obviously using a published setting is that you get to draw upon the resources that have already been set out for you and spin your own adventures off of them. Because, somebody who enjoys, home brewing, and to be honest, I've talked about how I'm a bit mercurial with my campaigns. Again, I've considered Greyhawk, I've considered Forgotten Realms. I was talking to you about this before we started the podcast here. But actually, my current focus has been kind of building a homebrew world. But admittedly, it can be work if you really want to build something with like internal consistency and the like. And there's a reason why the prepackaged campaigns were popular, because it is nice to kind of get that plug and play. But the great thing though is that this offers so much inspiration that I think can spin off some great adventures. And again, although we talked about kind of realms going something a kitchen sink, I do want to note that the old school realm still sort of, in my opinion, I think does something for everyone. You want a mega dungeon? Well, you got kind of, one of the great big mega dungeons there with Undermountain, underneath
right.
Waterdeep. Yeah, you want a high level, high magic campaign with a ton of ass kicking. Well, Myth Draenor is full of demons, but it's also full of really, really powerful magic items. And again, if you're playing Advanced Dungeons and Dragons in particular, or third edition for that matter, actually. Um, no attunement rules back then. Magic items were the way you got ahead back in these games. And God knows that when I was playing like Baldur's Gate and Baldur's Gate 2, getting the cool magic items, that was a huge part of the game. I love
I think
that
it
stuff.
still is. I love that kind of stuff.
Right. Well, again, and like I said, I've enjoyed fifth edition. When I ran it for my friends, I've enjoyed it too. Admittedly, that has been a bit of a thing, though. It's like characters get a lot more powerful just because they're leveling up. Obviously, if AD&D, you gain, you do get more powerful as you level up, but you got to interact with the world if you really want to get ahead. You're not just going to become, Joe Kickass because you hit 10th level. You need to have a magic sword, otherwise, you're still not hitting that often. Anyway,
Anyway, yeah. Well,
so
yeah. Well, Greg, thanks for. You know, I'm gonna enjoy hearing. I hope you get a group to the table. I hope I get my Osric game up as well, and
oh,
maybe
I
we
hope
can,
so too.
and then we
I think
can talk about it and how those things go, and
no,
how the
Carl, if you'd have me, I would love to exchange notes with you about it because
yeah,
I think it sounds awesome. Like I said, I've been working on my game here. Right before we got started, you sent me some materials for classic Caverns of Thracia because that's been one I've been brewing. But I actually am on the verge of my little homebrew world here. I'm on the verge of getting something together that I think is going to have a bit of keep on the Borderlands, and I'm going to co-opt a bit of the barrel maze actually. So I have a big mega dungeon there. It's like, okay, what do we want to do tonight? We just need to go get treasure. Well, you can go do that, and then we'll see how many of you survive. But I love to exchange notes with you about this, and I do want to give a bit of a shout out here that Osric's awesome. I backed Osric 3 as soon as it came, as soon as I saw it available on the backer kit.
yeah,
And I think that Matt Finch and Susie are just doing yeoman's work. They're amazing. And hope you don't mind me. I hope you don't mind me giving them sort of the sponsorship here. Go support them.
yeah, for sure. I think I like it a lot. I think it really explains a lot of things and tightens one of our favorite games, AD&D First Edition, up a little bit.
It
And
really does. And it's interesting because if you don't mind me kind of talking about that for a moment too here, a lot of people I feel because I read a ton of stuff on the, kind of in the OSR space, so to speak, because when I was kind of considering, okay, what kind of game do I want to run? Because
mhm,
I knew that I wanted to capture kind of old school feel, because this actually kind of ties back to what I said, hold a thought on that earlier. There's this whole notion there, and it was explained by a blogger named Rick Stump that talked about like if your torches weigh a pound, that's going to give your world meaning, essentially, sort of
mhm,
paraphrase. Because his whole notion was the more that your characters have to deal with, even sort of those mundanities that
mhm,
some people will say, it's not terribly fun. But here's the thing: if you got to worry about, okay, bringing rations, bringing torches, okay, now I got to go hire porters then and hire henchmen to guard my horses while I'm down in the dungeon. Well, that makes you interact with the world more and more and more. And then suddenly you've got all these connections to all these different NPCs there. Again, it is a style of game. I'm not saying there's a right or a wrong there, but it's definitely something to consider. And in that vein, the nice thing about Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, even over, say, old school essentials, is that it gives you all the rules to do that. And the great thing then about Osric is that in my humble opinion, Osric 3 in particular, it's bringing in that modern layout that Mythmere has done with Swords and Wizardry,
mhm.
and has made it a lot easier to understand. Um, I mean, certainly anybody who's watched our Against the Slave Lords campaign will know that every so often we had to parse what Gary Gygax had to say in his rule books.
Right, right.
But you know, if you don't mind me putting this plug in as well, for anybody who wants a game with sort of more meat on its bones than say Old School Essentials, great game, but it's BX. If you need something that gives you a deeper level of simulation, don't be scared of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons.
Not at
Seriously,
all.
it's really not that hard to run, actually.
Mm-hmm.
There's some confusing topics for sure, but once you kind of get your head around, I only really need to check for segments of a spells being cast. And once you kind of get your head around using the tables to generate your world as needed, it's really not that hard to run.
Mm-hmm. It is not. And we're having fun.
I'm having a great time in the AD&D game.
Well, yeah, me too. I hope it continues. We are finally in A1 if you guys want to check that out. But they've done I think a masterful job of surviving and dealing with the encounters that I've thrown at them, that the adventure throws at them. So, well, anyway, thank you so much, Greyic, for coming on and talking about one of my favorite game worlds, Forgotten Realms.
Sure. Uh, uh, really happy to have been able to join you tonight, Carl.
All right. Talk to you soon.
All right.
Well, that was pretty awesome. It's always great to have one of your players come on and talk to you about games. It becomes very conversational and share war stories and notes. So thanks again, Grant, for coming on and talking about Greybox Forgotten Realms. A good place to start. And I mean, I don't know. I think like if I ran a Forgotten Realms in later times, I would throw in little Easter eggs about my past Forgotten Realms campaigns, the time of troubles where one of my players hooked up with the avatar of Maliki. It was a running joke and a fun, kind of cool instance of when things happened. And one of my players who had a paladin attire, cut off his own hand in sort of homage to his god. Didn't blind himself because that would have been very interesting. And then finally in 3.5, the epic story of one of my players who had a character named Benito, who was a priest of Ilmater and did incredible miracles in places like Twilight Hollow, Silvery Moon, across the Sword Coast and the North, and became a saint in the eyes of many worshippers of Ilmater. So I would have like a cult of Saint Benito in another iteration of Forgotten Realms, but down the timeline in the 5e or 4e or whatever verse post 3.5. But I really enjoyed the realms a lot, and I'm glad I got to talk to someone about starting a realms campaign. So as you guys know, I've moved recently from San Antonio, Texas, to the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I've lived in San Antonio. Man, I lived in San Antonio more than half my life, I believe. And it's a definite change. But recently, we've been able to explore the surroundings. So a couple shout outs to Rail Yard Tap Room, which is a new tap room that has beers from the local area and has like a mug club, a place to go. They're gonna have a kitchen soon. There's a really great vibe when I went there. It reminds me of San Antonio Flying Saucer. And then we just wanted a good burger, and we looked on the Googles, and it said, "Hey, go to this place called Garhole." I'd love to know how they got a name like Garhole. It's in Westminster, Texas, which I think is about to be absorbed by Anna, Texas, or annexed, or however that works. But it's like out in the middle of nowhere, and it's a like a honky tonk. They got live music all the time and fantastic burgers. So my wife and I checked that place out, and yeah, I think it was great to get to explore finally in the area that we're now living in. And there's some really cool places. Anyway, thanks again for listening. I hope you've enjoyed the GMologist Presents and our discussion about the Forgotten Realms. You might have your hate or love for it, and that's cool. And I'd love to hear feedback about it and what you think of it. I mean, I love the Pathfinder world of Galarion. I love the Forgotten Realms. I really have enjoyed Greyhawk as I've delved into it. I love Eberron too. I mean, I don't know. I love all these worlds that people have made. But hey, if you want to discuss them and talk about them, send me a line. You can reach me at gmologist@gmail.com. Send me a DM on the various Discords. Send me a message like Rich from Cockatrice Nuggets has via SpeakPipe. And the link will be in the show notes. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. My wife does the cover clip art. The amazing TJ does the intro and outro music. Again, thanks for listening. I'll talk to you soon. Good night. Good roll.